Hi, welcome to Box on the Box, Rock and Celluloid, Bot Brack for short. I'm over Box, and today I'm going to be looking at the top 10 films of Roman Polanski. I'll address the controversy just quickly. I'm here to talk about his films. I got into Polanski many years ago before I knew about that, although I did know about it later on, what he did in 1976, or 77. I'm just here to talk about the films. I would look at anyone watching this would just look it up online, have a read through his biography. Can watch, I think it's Robert Evans, The Kid Stays in the Picture, maybe some documentaries on Polanski as well. And you can look at his life. Roman Polanski. So there wasn't really, the only film I really considered with this was maybe Frantic, his thriller with Harrison Ford. Which I'm not massively keen on. It's kind of more interesting that Harrison Ford made a film with Roman Polanski set in Paris. Obviously it had to be made in Paris because Polanski lives in exile, Switzerland I think. But it was just interesting that Harrison Ford was in that period then when he was kind of branching out a bit with the directors and the films he did. And it's a Hitchcockian thriller, and obviously that's something Polanski kind of does well. But I think it's kind of less successful than it is successful, but it's worth seeing. So my number 10 choice I'm going for, it's not a film I love, but it's kind of strange, and I think, it's got to be in there. Obviously, people watching this who don't live in the area of Newcastle or know up in Northumberland, or you might know there's a place called Lindisfarne, and there's a Holy Island Castle there. That's been used in a lot of films, and it's used in this film's Cul-de-sac, which is my number 10 choice. So this is a strange film. There's a couple living in the castle, and a gangster on the run, Lionel Stander. Max from Heart to Heart turns up. It's a strange film. It's got some strange imagery. It makes use of the causeway. There's a causeway there, so basically that cuts it off from the mainland. So it's got an interesting atmosphere. The Castle of Holy Island, if you go on it, it's actually quite small. It's not that grand, but that's what makes it cool. It's also quite interesting. You've got Francois Dorlac in it, who was Catherine Deneuve's sister, and she was tragically killed in a car accident in 1967 when she was on the cusp of stardom. It's also got Jack McGowan in it, and he would star in Polanski's, another film that I'm going to pick in a bit. It's got explores themes of horror, frustrated sexual alienation. That's what it's saying here on Wikipedia. I haven't seen it for a long time, but but it's mostly set inside the castle, around the castle, and like Polanski's expertise is about creating claustrophobia or shooting in a kind of limited or some kind of limited space, and he can position, direct actors, and frame those spaces really well, and that's what he does. And it doesn't look or feel like any other film at its time. It's British made, and it's got a British sensibility, but it's got a European thing as well. And obviously, a director like Carol Rice at the time, I forget which country Carol Rice was from originally, but he was working in the Angry Young Man phase of British cinema in the early 60s. So this isn't an Angry Young Man film, of course, but it kind of fits in that cooler black and white progressive cinema of the 1960s in Britain, before we just did costume dramas, and comedies, but we don't do those now really, not as much at the moment. Okay, so my number 9 choice, again, this isn't a classic compared to Cul-de-sac, but it's The Ghostwriter. So this is his 2010 film. It's interesting, this is made before the Harvey Weinstein stuff and the Me Too, which kind of brought the Polanski behaviour and the case back up to the fore. It's unlikely now that these actors would appear in this for fear of the association of that. But it's got Ewan McGregor, Pierce Brosnan, King Cattrall, Olivia Williams. So this is based on the Robert Harris book. Ewan McGregor plays a ghostwriter, and he goes to do the biography of Pierce Brosnan's Tony Blair type PM, and he he's kind of suspicious. He's there's kind of a conspiracy. He's trying to get to the bottom of what's gone on. Nagarton Island in Martha's Vineyard, obviously it's not filmed in the US. It can't, because Polanski can't work there. He would be arrested. It's good. It keeps you gripped, and it's got a good, the final twist or the final kind of, all right, this is what the crack is. It's good. The acting's good. Olivia Williams is very good as the Cherry Blair type. Really, it looks about at Iraq. Harris, on his book, he must look at Iraq and the fallout from that. And yeah, it's a good film, good solid thriller. Not brilliant, but solidly made. And the performances are good. Pierce Brosnan, it's nice to see him stretch out in it. Olivia Williams is very good. McGregor's very good. It was $45 million budget, $6 million hit. It had a pretty good reception. This 84% positive reviews. It's a good film and one of Polanski's probably his best later film. Although he's been pretty consistent. So that's my number 9 choice. My number 8 choice is his debut film Knife in the Water. So this is a three-handed kind of psychological thriller. Not massively thrillery, but basically a couple are taking in Poland. Taking a day out, they've borrowed a car, I guess, from the kind of the authorities' carpool because the husband works somewhere in a communist regime. They pick up a hitchhiker. He decides they offer him the opportunity to go on their boat, their little sailing boat, and they're on it for 24 hours. And a kind of psychodrama plays out between a younger man, the hitchhiker they picked up, and the husband. And the young hitchhiker has a knife, and that's the kind of symbolic power image that they fight over. Not a knife fight or anything out like that, but I suppose it's a phallic symbol. I think what this film shows, the acting's really good, the photography's great. It shows Polanski's ability to, what I said before, although the boat is on open water, it's like a confined space. There's a Hitchcock film called Lifeboat, which is a kind of one of Hitchcock kind of technical challenges. Can I film a film on a boat? So this is different because the boat's moving around and we've got sequences off the boat. But what's interesting is the way Polanski films within the boat, on the boat, and uses the geometry of it. So, the way the ropes go up to the sails, he'll frame shots. There's a great bit where he kind of frames the young man lying down. The trees in the background at one point, because it's moving, he almost gets it lined up perfectly for a bit. There's a bit where the young lad goes up the sails and he shoots above his head and there's a beautiful angle. So it shows his skill, for a debut film. It's really good. I mean, it's bloody impressive. The skill he shows. He's got a really cool jazz score. In actual fact, the melody on the jazz score and the sax reminds me a bit of Chinatown as well. But also Bernard Herrmann's score for Taxi Driver. It's lean and mean. It's only 94 minutes long and it's rated as one of the greatest Polish films ever. And he totally broke out for Polanski. I'm assuming after this he managed to get to UK and make his second film, which we won't come to yet. But my number 7 choice is his 1971 version of the Scottish play, his version of Macbeth. So I'm guessing, I'm not sure how much the text is pared down. This is 140 minutes. I think the Michael Fassbender film with the Australian director and Marion Cotillard, I think that's only about 90 minutes, 100 minutes. Interestingly, that version's filmed at Bamburgh Castle, which is up in Northumberland, near where I live. And this used a variety of locations around the UK, one of which was Bamburgh Castle, and the aforementioned Lindisfarne. I don't know if it uses Lindisfarne Castle, but it might use the Sands. Obviously, yeah, Macbeth, famous play. It starts with the witches. I think where this has props, it uses basically the liberalisation of the violence code, nudity, sex, to kind of do a full-on version of the play. Obviously back in the day, you wouldn't, when the play was done, you wouldn't have you'd have the inference of it, but this shows it. The acting's good, John Finch is good, Francesca Annis, beautiful English actress, really great. I'm amazed she didn't have a better career, really. Not that she had a bad career, but every bit is beautiful. Someone like Helen Mirren with the classical acting chops. Had a good film career. She's in June, stuff like that. Krull, obviously big career, TV, the theatre. Someone who maybe could have been bigger. Martin Shaw's in it. Doyle from The Professionals. So the guy shot is Gil Taylor. He did Doctor Strangelove, The Omen, Star Wars. Very famous cinematographer, and he actually shoots. He shot. What was it called? Sorry, Cul-de-sac. Yeah, he shot that film. The one I put before. So this is a really good, you know, if I'm massively into Shakespeare, but you don't need to be into Shakespeare to enjoy this. The way it's shot the locations, the way it's done like a full-blooded costume drama, and just the classic sequences. It's really good. Wasn't a hit at the time, but it's quite well thought of now. Okay, so my number 6 choice is his first film made in exile. It's French. Actually, I'm telling a lie. I'm guessing he must have made it in France, but we went into exile 78, he left. Why he went to France for this, I don't know. But anyway, it's The Tenant. So this is a psychological thriller. Polanski moves into an apartment where the previous tenant, a girl, has committed suicide, and he gradually becomes more unhinged. So I should say he actually stars in this. And Polanski's an effective actor. He's not jarring the way Tarantino is, or way Scorsese's cameo can be a bit Marty or playful like Hitchcock. He can properly, for me, inherit a character. I think because he's got his diminutive stature and he's got his intriguing look. I don't know. You can kind of get empathy with him, and he's got good delivery. I'm not sure where he learned that skill. I'm assuming we would look it up on on the internet. But he is an effective actor, an incredible cameo in Chinatown. Sven Nykvist, sorry, he shoots this. So that's of course the great cinematographer of Ingmar Bergman. Isabella Gianni's in this, Melvyn Douglas, Joe Van Fleet, Shelley Winter. So it's got American characters, but it's French made. This is the last one in his apartment trilogy, so Repulsion and Rosemary's Baby would be the other ones in that. Again, using the confined spaces trademark. A couple of tech things in this. I think it's the final shot. He kills himself and fails, so he jumps off, and then he drags himself back up the stairs, and I think it's at that point he uses a Luma crane to achieve quite an extraordinary shot. I should say Polanski's not a guy who does flashy shots, but this is one of them. So Luma crane is a recent piece of technology used back then. It's a small crane with a camera on the end that's smaller, and it can get into nooks and crannies and do complex movements, and it's done remotely like a crane. So Antonioni is the first director. I think uses this to staggering effect in the climax of The Passenger. A shot that people still can't work out how he did it. I think it's cutaway sets. I think it's the sets are moving away as the camera moves through. If you watch the end, but watch the film The Passenger, it's very good. Jack Nicholson. And then this, it's a cool shot. So this, it's really good. This, it's the unhingement is gradual. He's very good. He builds up the gradual unhingement. It's not like The Shining, a film I love, where Jack Nicholson's kind of unhinged straight off. It says many critics have noted the Tenant's strong Kafka influenced typified atmosphere that is absurdly overburdened with anxiety, confusion, guilt, bleak human alienation, sexual frustration and paranoia. So I'm just reading off the internet there. But I suppose that the Kafka, the trial, is that nightmare of bureaucracy, and the people use the term Kafka-esque, where people don't seem to be able to escape the oppressive atmosphere, I suppose, and that would refer to his apartment. So that's the Tenant. I saw that years ago, and I saw it again fairly recently, but it's still quite a while ago. But it's a really interesting film, well worth checking out. So up to now, all these films I would say are really good films. This next one's kind of quirky. I love it. I saw this as a kid. It's back in the day we would have Hammer horrors on. Back in 1980-81, and I don't know if this film was on at the time, or maybe there was a season of Polanski films. So when I started watching, I didn't realise it was a comedy horror, but it's really good. It's Dance of the Vampires, or the Fearless Vampire Killers. So this is British made. It's actually called The Fierce Vampire Killers, or pardon me, but your teeth are in my neck. Now Polanski appears in this, and he's very funny in this. He plays the assistant to Jack McGowan's character. Jack McGowan, he appears in The Exorcist as well as a film director, and he died shortly after that. Douglas Slocum does the cinematography on this. So Dougie Slocum, very famous, did The Italian Job. I think he does Raiders of the Lost Ark. A famous British cinematographer. What's interesting about this film, it kind of recreates the Hammer look, but kind of with more budget and artistry, but it's very funny. There's a really funny bit where the kind of the vampire henchman gets in a coffin and slides down the hill. I remember seeing it as a kid and laughing at it. And it's got a wonderful score. It's got a kind of vocal, la 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 la, dreamy sort of main theme. Yes, 108 minutes. I think it's quite long for that kind of film. You know, typically you see a Hammer horror is going to be 80 minutes, 85, 90 at best. So I think I remember that. Sharon Tate appears in this. I'm guessing this is where he met her. It's from 1967. Obviously, they get married in 68, early 69, and she would be murdered after that by the Manson family. It's a very, very funny film. Like I said, it's got a great look. Yeah, it says here 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's not to everyone's taste. I suppose if people want kind of comedy horror, they'll go for like Young Frankenstein as kind of definitive classic. This isn't a slapstick. It's kind of more. It's kind of a subtle, I suppose. Yeah, I really like it, and I've not seen it for a while, but I've seen it a few times, so I'd like to see that again. So that's my number 5 choice. So my number 4 choice. This is his. You know, Polanski's probably got 4 really, really great films. Some people would disagree and would conclude Cul-de-sac and Knife in the Water and that. And I would disagree with that, but this is what I think's like a fucking dog's bollocks film, and it's his second film, which is 1965's Repulsion. So it's one of the key psychological horrors, not only of his day, of all time. So Catherine Deneuve plays a young girl in an apartment. This is the first apartment trilogy film, and she slowly loses her mind. Figures come out the wall, and things like that. It's the sort of thing now. You know, you think of these twisty-turny psychological horrors. Is it real? Is it not? We see that all the time now. I mean, thinking of a film where they're trying to convince someone's going mad. I suppose you've got Gaslighting, the Berman film, and Spiral Staircase would maybe tap into, you know, some of that. Certainly The Innocents, the Deborah Carr film. You know, is it in the governess's mind or is it really happening? But this really kind of just stays with her. Music by Chico Hamilton, pretty cool. Yeah, there's only Patrick Wymark. He's got Ian Hendry, John Fraser. You know, there's various people visit the apartment, but it's mainly focused on Deneuve. She's at that point. She's I think she's only 24. No, she's 22. Actually, probably 21 when she appears in it. Pretty amazing. I mean, beautiful woman, beautiful then, beautiful now. But it shows great skill. You know, a really great young actress and beyond. Really coolly shot. Cinematography again is Gilbert Taylor. And yeah, it's regularly talked about as a film. You know, you've got to see. And it's yeah, it's a classic. Really good, and it's got a really famous shot at the end that kind of predates The Shining. Really, I'll not tell you what happens, but it basically tells you why she is the way she is, and it's brilliant, and yeah, really good. The jazzy score is actually used to great effect in to kind of what's the word I'm looking for, to underscore her defragmentation, I suppose. So my number 3 choice. This was a tough one. Is it 3? Is it 2? I'm going to go for number 3, The Pianist. I've changed my mind. So The Pianist is his kind of like sort of a comeback film, I suppose. So after The Tenant, he then makes Tess, which this may have made me my top 10, but I've got to confess I've just not seen this for years. I've seen it once. I would like to see it again. It's just not on. Maybe we should dig out the DVD. That gets Oscar nominations and is well received. Then he has a gap of 7 years. I mean, seems extraordinary now. Then he makes a film called Pirates, which is a big flop. Walter Matthau. Yeah, it cost $40 million and only made like 6 worldwide. I mean, $40 million back then is an astronomical amount. Kind of fits in with the era, I think. There's a lot of filmmakers around that time who have been big in the 70s and 60s who are trying to navigate the 80s, and it just doesn't happen. Then he makes Frantic with Harrison Ford, which again is another sort of flop, $20 million budget, only $70.5 million. I think Frantic, one of the problems with Frantic was, again, that kind of contributed to Harrison Ford going, I'll just stick to being Harrison Ford more. I love Harrison Ford, but I just love to see him have worked with more directors of the calibre of Polanski and Peter Weir. Then there's Bitter Moon, which is a kind of chamber piece. It's got Hugh Grant in this. Again, doesn't do much. And then there's The Ninth Gate, which is a satanic horror with Johnny Depp. Again, the box office is a bit better on this, $38 million budget, nearly $60 million gross, but not a hit. So he's still getting money without having a hit. And then in 2002, he makes The Pianist. And really, I suppose this is his... I suppose catharsis isn't a way, but he's able to explore his own experience of the Holocaust, particularly the liquidation of the ghetto in Krakow. Obviously, his mum and father were murdered. This is a very good film. It's about the pianist, Vladislav Slipman. I've pronounced that wrong, I'm sure. Played by Adrian Brody. Bad Oscar. What I mean by that is he deserves the Oscar, but since then he's never done anything as good, Adrian Brody. It's really good, and this guy hides out in the ghetto and survives. Well, you have to watch it, but he does. He survives the war, and it's terrific. I think Polanski. What is interesting about this is Polanski is not afraid of Schindler's List. It's 9 years after that, and Schindler's List, being the great film and depiction of the Holocaust as it was. He's got his own images, he's got his own way of telling this story. There's an amazing bit when near the end where he kind of walks out of a building and the whole place is flattened, and he's the guy's barely alive because he's been starving. It's very, very good. It's powerful. 150 minutes, but deserves the right length for this kind of story. It won Brody the Oscar, won Polanski the Oscar. Obviously, he wasn't there to get it, but it shows you, I think, the attitude in Hollywood then wasn't what it's like now in the post-Weinstein era. They just wouldn't, he'd be cancelled now. He wouldn't have won it. But, screenplay by Ronald Harwood as well. And the cinematography's Guy Powell Elderman. But yeah, it's my number 3 choice, great film. So my number 2 choice is his first Hollywood film and his first breakout hit. This is the film that... This is a film that got him recognised, and I think people, it's worth remembering Polanski because of this film, and then The Murder of His Wife a year later. Polanski was like a name in directing that people knew who maybe weren't into films, after Hitchcock. Now we talk about Spielberg, Tarantino, Christopher Nolan as names out there, but Polanski was a name that people are aware of. Obviously, this is Rosemary's Baby, great classic horror film, great cinematography by William A. Fraker. This again really takes place a lot in the apartment, shows his skill in confined spaces. Great performance by Mia Farrow, not even Oscar nominated, should have won the Oscar. John Cassavetes, the great John Cassavetes, fantastic. Ruth Gordon, best supporting actress, brilliant. A lot of black humour with her character, and Sidney Blackmer, her husband. Maurice Evans, Ralph Bellamy, great at the end. He has his father's eyes. And what's interesting, this is the first big kind of budget where a studio makes. You had Robert Wise's The Haunting and The Innocents, but this is them taking a bestseller from the IR11, getting a really hot director and a studio making a big horror film, and it grossed $33 million back. Whether that's global or probably American box office on a $3 million budget. To put it into context now, 1968, you'd be a multiplier of about 7. On that, so this film would easily gross over $200 million, and it's the precursor of films like The Exorcist and The Omen, big studio horror films that attract really good filmmakers. Great. I'll just tell you one story about it. So I watched a documentary called Painting with Light, and William A. Fraker was interviewed, and this shows the genius of Polanski. And there was a scene where Ruth Gordon was talking to Mia Farrow in the sort of bedroom door. I think Ruth Gordon was maybe sat on the bed and Mia Farrow's talking to her. So he lined up the shots, so Polanski wanted them so they were in the doorway, you kind of seeing in through the doorway. And he kind of looked at it, and Fraker had lined it up dead on. He called him Billy. And he said, no, not like this, Billy. And Polanski moved the camera, so you sort of just saw the camera half kind of the wall and just saw them kind of round the doorway. And Fraker was like, why the hell is he doing that? And then when Fraker went to see the film with the pictures, at that point all the audience went like that. And that's the genius of like Polanski, which is the genius of these great filmmakers that I talk about in these top tens, and why we love filmmakers, because they understand how the camera, how by positioning the camera and the actors a certain way can have a psychological function, and that can get in touch with us watching it. Yeah. So there's there's method in their madness. They're not just plonking the camera somewhere and going to the actor say this. They're doing things deliberately to tell the story visually. Okay, so let's go back through the top 10 Polanski films. Number 10, The Cul-de-sac. 9, The Ghostwriter. 8, Knife in the Water. 7, Macbeth. 6, The Fearless Vampire Killers, or Dance of the Vampires is another title. Sorry, that's the Tenant at number 5. Number 6. Number 5 is The Fearless Vampire Killers. Apologies. 4, Repulsion, probably his first really stone cold classic. 3, Rosemary's... 2, The Pianist. 3, The Pianist, and 2, Rosemary's Baby. Sorry, my list here is in a different order. I've changed my mind as I've gone on. Okay, so my number 1 film is... It's no surprise. It's not only his greatest film; it's one of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. It's one of the best, absolute best Hollywood films of the 1970s. Only The Godfathers 1 and 2 and Apocalypse Now would come close to this, or we class them as better, in my opinion. Of course, it's Chinatown. So regularly, this is voted, the best original screenplay to come out of Hollywood by Robert Town. Robert Evans is the producer, the famous producer of his day, young buck. Amazing acting by Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway and John Huston. And an extraordinarily kind of prescient film. It's themes of corruption and sexual deviancy and stuff is still prescient. I mean, what's bizarre about this is that the father's raped his daughter, and then there's implications at the end that he'll do the same to the young granddaughter. Well, his daughter. It's all fucked up. Polanski shortly after this, has sex, rapes a 13-year-old. Like I say, look all that up. But amazing cinematography by John Alonzo. Something about this film, whenever the score just cranks up, like Jerry Goldsmith's score on the titles, just amazing. Just perfect filmmaking for me. Big Oscar nomination, 10 Oscar nominations for this, and $6 million budget, $29 million gross. A good size hit in its day, and part of that classic Hollywood films of its day. Where the kind of you got the movie brats, but you've got like the new Hollywood, as they call it, making inroads in the style of acting, the style of stories that have been told. Polanski makes an amazing cameo in this as a mobster, Kitty Cat, and he slits Jack Nicholson's nose with a penknife, and Jack Nicholson spends the rest of the film with a bandage on his face. Which is amazing. I mean, there's just, there's no way, Tom Cruise is going to do that. Nicholson's one of the biggest stars at the time. The end's incredible as well. If you watch that, it's all one take. The car's driving down the street. The cops shoot. It crashes. It's all one pass and they arrive. And Faye Dunaway, she's been shot through the back of the head. And it's come out through her eye. Just really horrific, but the kind of the urgency and the whole horror of that scene. And then the hideous John Huston character condolencing his granddaughter. But yeah, there's an amazing line in that where John Huston goes, I can. Where's the effect? I realise I can get away with anything, such as his power, and I think that there's still that today. Things are changing. Like a Jeffrey Epstein type of character, they're not getting away with it. Amazing film, amazing achievement. So that ends it. Polanski, like I say, controversial figure, look that up. But this was, apart from the bits I've talked about, that the case and stuff, was just to go for his top 10 films. And, sadly, often great artists are also dicks in real life. So there we go. Okay, cheers, thanks very much.